Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm very excited to have Joachim Horsley here.
Thank you so much for having me.
He's got the most exciting music up ahead. And I got to tell you, as someone that loves classical music, I'm actually thrilled to share with you today how he takes classical themes and turns them into a whole Latin thing that's out of this world. It's just like foot tapping, great stuff. And there's some of these pieces I play personally, like the Prelude in G minor. I absolutely love what you did with that. I have a student of mine that's doing Bach Prelude in C right now, and she's getting a big kick out of how you rumberize it, whatever you want to say.
Sure.
So welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. That's great. So you're playing the Rachmaninoff. That's bold.
Oh yeah.
It's a really hard piece.
At one point I actually have a CD out called Classical Sojourn, and I have about 18 pieces, some of which took me 3 or 4 years to play. Kind of tricky stuff, and then I can't do it anymore because I have that on top of my chops, But anyway, just love what you're doing with it. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? How did you get exposed to music? Were you from a musical family? How did things start for you?
Okay. Well, I grew up in the Boston area. My parents were the folks that had the opera blasting in the house every Saturday. Lots of classical music, lots of other kinds of music too, but there was a ton of classics from the very early age. And I had an older brother and older sister. She played violin and my brother played piano. And my brother was a really good pianist, and he was about 5 years older than me, which if any of you out there have older brothers, that's the age for a long time he becomes your absolute idol. So whatever he did, I wanted to do. So he became a really good piano player. And he was focused on boogie woogie. When I was 3 years old, there's videos of him playing boogie woogie and me running up to the piano and trying to play in rhythm, right next to him. And he was very tolerant, of course, because we were having fun. And he ended up continuing with piano, and eventually, he and I did music together in a band called Little Horse. When I got out of college,
Wow.
I studied music at a liberal arts school in upstate New York called Skidmore College, and I had just a regular old BA in music, but I had a lot of extraordinary experiences because I studied with Chris Brubeck, who was there as the son of Dave Brubeck.
Wow.
And that for me was a very important time. And then after college, I played with my brother. We had a 2-piano rock band called Little Horse, and that went on for a period of time. And then I studied in Berlin with Sam Adler, the composer and orchestrator, who wrote probably the best book on orchestration, and that was also a really formative time. That was 2006, summer of 2006.
Yeah.
And then in 2007, when I was living in New York at the time, I was continuing to write jingles and short films for mostly independent filmmakers and students even in New York. That's kind of how I started in the film composing world. And by about 2009, my wife and I, she being pregnant with our first son, drove to Los Angeles. I participated in a composer workshop, and I stayed. And for about 4 or 5 years, I worked primarily as an orchestrator and all sorts of small music jobs to be around composing, just anything I could do to get composing gigs. And by about 2015, I was at a point where I was doing some composing and some orchestrating, but I felt like I was really a little bit lost musically, honestly. And a friend of mine ran a percussion workshop in Cuba, and his name was Aldo Maza. He runs these workshops once a year where he brings Americans and people from all over the world down to Cuba with an affidavit so they can study music for a week. And so I took advantage of that, and that week was incredible for me. It really, really changed my life because I'd always loved Latin music. I'd studied Latin jazz intensely, of course, but when I got to Cuba, I realized how well, first of all, there's nothing like Havana in terms of how much passion is just flying around in terms of music.
Yeah.
I think anyone who's been there or lived there knows that it's a very special place for the arts in general and music in particular. And for me, when they say that you have 2 lives and the second one starts when you realize you have one, that's really what happened to me while I was in Cuba. And so
Wow.
I came back and I got very focused about doing this classical Caribbean fusion project. And so in 2015, I started with a piece called Beethoven in Havana. And of course, I had no band. So what I did is I took this Beethoven symphony, this famous one, and it was just in the movie The King's Speech. So it was kind of in the air, you could say.
Hmm.
Everybody was vibing on Beethoven's second movement from the Seventh Symphony. And I thought this might be cool to do in a Cuban style. And also I was, using Aldo's book and other people's books. I was studying, original Cuban orchestration. And, the only way to really understand these things is to listen to recordings and try to actually duplicate it. So basically, Beethoven in Havana is essentially rumba and timba, and we'll talk about what timba is later, but you can think of timba as basically modern Cuban music, and it's kind of a way of synthesizing some older Cuban styles with the Beethoven. Long story short is it was just me for 6 months experimenting and making this video, and I put it out just to see what would happen, and people seemingly loved it so much that people were calling me from Europe saying, hey, you got to come over here and tour. And I just was in a say yes mode. So I did, and ended up doing two albums with a Paris-based label called La Café, and then a third album called Afro Bach, and now I'm working on my fourth album. And so it's been about 10 years of doing this project. In the meantime, I write the music for the Disney Channel show Big City Greens and many other shows and movies. So I've kind of kept two lives as a film composer and as this crazy pianist doing this classical fusion Caribbean project. And so I have my Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde life, and I've come to make peace with both aspects of it, and I'm enjoying myself.
Well, I got to tell you, we're loving both sides of you. So let's listen to some of this Beethoven in Havana. This is just great.
Great. Thank you.
Wonderful. So
Yes.
now, how did you even get, how did you even go about doing this? Did you have a production company help you do this, or did you get a grant to assemble all this? A lot of people involved in this thing. How did you do that?
Well, ultimately, I ended up, this is an independent project. So, in some cases I got help from the label, but a lot of times it's me basically funding it myself, using my income from being a film composer. So,
Yeah.
in many cases, it's always a scrappy thing. I'm asking favors. A lot of the guys in my orchestra are people I play with on film scores, and so they know the struggle, and I try to take advantage of every good rate I can. But it's an independent project, so a lot of it has been self-funded.
Beautiful. It really came across so nicely, very nicely.
So what you just heard was Beethoven in Havana, the orchestral version. And that was a version that I created later in the timeline. Actually, right before I played at the Kennedy Center opening for John Baptiste and a night
Oh,
hosted by Ben Folds.
mm,
I was working with Ben Folds I was his orchestrator for his piano concerto that he wrote with the Nashville Symphony. And once we got to know each other, he asked if I wanted to premiere Beethoven in Havana as an orchestra piece. And so I did that. And that's how I met the conductor Giacomo, who's in the video. And then Giacomo came to LA and we did a version in the studio together, which ended up being the version you just heard.
yeah.
So fortunately, I've had the opportunity to play that piece with orchestras around the world, including going back to Cuba in 2019, playing with the Cuban National Symphony Orchestra, which,
Wow.
which of course was a real pleasure to be in Cuba
Mm,
to be playing that piece again.
yeah.
And anyway, so that's kind of the mothership of the project. Everyone seems to, I think, that's the piece that everyone seems to be still asking for, and it's in some ways kind of the piece to beat. I'm not saying I want to beat it, but it sure is the one that people keep coming back for, and I'm very grateful for that arrangement and the amount of attention it brought to the whole project. So
Yeah.
yeah,
By the way, I want to encourage people to go to, I'm going to share the screen now and go to, first of all, your website. Uh, you have a YouTube, you have two presences I know about. You have the YouTube website, which is
yes,
beautiful, and it's got a lot of these videos on there. So I encourage people to go back and just listen to these. You can spend hours and hours listening to this wonderful stuff. And then you also have your website, joachimhorsley.com, which
right.
also has a wonderful collection of things, including a lot of call outs on the different things you've done with Disney and that sort of thing, which is wonderful. So
Yeah,
just really great background on all of this. So congratulations for all of that.
thank you so much.
So let's do the Moonlight Mozambique at this point, which is obviously
Yes.
based on the Moonlight Sonata. And then you actually have, I think we'll play enough of it to show that you had dancers with this one too, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can tell you the whole story after we listen.
Okay, sure. I just, since I played this piece, I just absolutely getting a big kick out of it. It's just wonderful. And so
Oh,
now you
thanks.
actually had a lot of classical training too, I imagine. So these are pieces that probably you really played. So
Yes, it requires a ton of training, and you're exactly right. I mean, one thing you can't skip over is hours of training to play it well. The challenge with this repertoire is, aside from the fact that, of course, it's new, it's a new rhythm. It has to really serve two masters. It has
yeah,
to preserve the grace and the panache and the passion of the original composer, but it has to be danceable.
yeah,
So, when you're playing something like Beethoven, right, there's a vibe. You have to really kind of tap into, all of us who play Beethoven kind of know, we can describe it with words, but there's a feeling of Beethoven. And what I'm really trying to do is keep that passionate feeling that we all love from hearing the legit Beethoven,
yeah.
and just really play this role-playing game. We're like, what if this guy was living in Havana, not Vienna? And what would it be like? Because we all know people's surroundings influence the art. These artists never
Absolutely.
They didn't exist in a vacuum. And it's, to me, I remember, when we talk about everyone from the Beatles to James Taylor to Ravel to, Gershwin, all these guys are a product of the world that they were living in at the time. So even if we have today's Mozart living, he will not do the same thing as Mozart. Maybe he won't even be in music. But the point is, these artists are a product of their environment. And so the game we're playing here is, what if they were in a different environment, and so it's kind of, it's almost like an opinion about how much is this natural person versus how much is the culture they were coming from. And that's kind of what I like to toy with. And I hope that, to me, it's successful if people hear that really Beethoven's still there, but he's in a different context. That's really the goal. And sometimes I do an arrangement and I feel that I've kind of almost invalidated the whole point of the original thing. Like, one thing that's been really, really tricky is Stravinsky, for example. Stravinsky's a 20th century composer. He's so rhythmic. Obviously, he's really rhythmically sophisticated. So it's a little dangerous to try to put him inside like a Cuban dance rhythm, because a big part of what Stravinsky's offering was like a change in rhythm from what was traditionally classical music. Yes. So in that way, I feel I haven't, for me, been successful in adapting Stravinsky, but I love Stravinsky so much, and I'm trying to sort of figure out how to imagine him in a different context. But that's one composer, for example, that I just can't pull it off. The thing about Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach is it's metrically simple, you could say. I mean, not always, but generally, rhythmically, it's already pretty simple. So adapting it into a syncopated Caribbean rhythm, the formula isn't necessarily violating the spirit of the music, if you know what I'm saying. So,
as you're talking about this, I'm even thinking, because I happen to love a lot of Debussy. Have you tried playing with Debussy? Because I think,
yeah. I absolutely. I have an arrangement called Cabo Verde Arabesque, which is Debussy's Arabesque number 2.
Oh, wonderful.
In a Cabo Verde style. And, Debussy's, obviously, that's another composer where, especially like Sunken Cathedral and obviously so many things, it's so incredibly, the grace and power and expression of Debussy. It's one of these things where you have to be really careful because, I think of Latin music, generally speaking, having like 3 dynamic levels, right? You have basically soft, middle, and loud. So sometimes in a salsa song, for example, just very broadly speaking, you have, the verse is at the soft dynamic, the pre-chorus is at the, let's say middle dynamic, and then the chorus is the loud dynamic. Now, with classical music, you of course have much more dynamics, but you for sure have at least 4 layers. And because underneath there's this sotto voce layer, when we think of Mozart's Requiem and those dramatic moments where, cantatis, and then it goes into the part that's written sotto voce. We all know this from the movie Amadeus, so it's a good example of. That's a great example of Mozart really in his orchestrational prime, because he's using this like incredibly soft texture. And that's something that I really try to do in every arrangement, is really try to go for dynamics. And, with Latin music, generally speaking, it's not as dynamic as classical music. So I try to always preserve a little bit of that graceful, dynamic part in the original arrangements. For me, that's a special thing that happens in classical music, which unfortunately doesn't translate to a lot of other genres.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sure.
Yes, you don't quite have the dynamic range in, let's say, salsa music or even pop music or country, western, whatever it is. You just don't, because that's not one of the priorities. So I like trying to get that in there, because as an arrangement, you're like, as an arranger, you're constantly pursuing drama, right? I mean, in a way, just bringing in music from the Caribbean and bringing the music from classical world, like bringing these seemingly disparate styles together, you're like, the contrast and the drama, the potential is there. That's why you're always looking for opposite things and, sort of manipulating the listener into expecting one thing and then subverting their expectations. As an arranger, what you're really going for is as much contrast potential as possible. So classical music versus Caribbean music, putting them together, loud dynamics versus extremely soft. And the more the extremes, the more broad your palette is for making a strong arrangement. And you want to take listeners on a journey. And, a lot of the pieces that I'm working with, they're long, like Beethoven in a Havana is based off a piece that played at the right tempo is about 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's about 4 minutes. And obviously I make a couple cuts. But the reason I tried to aim for 4 minutes is because I feel that there's just a certain level of exhaustion that happens when you have a dance song that goes on for 9 minutes. It's a different format.
Yeah.
Also, so you're making choices. And so to do that and not compromise the music, obviously, you have to really, you come to a point where you're like, well, what is really essential in order to communicate this? You have to make some compromises. Obviously,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you can't do that. And anyway, so it's a game, right? It's this little game, and you kind of create a game for yourself to pull off this kind of project.
Yeah.
And you make all these rules for yourselves. And the fundamental one, I keep going back to, is what if this guy was living in the Caribbean instead of 19th century Europe, for example?
By the way, I would love to see you take Girl with the Flaxen Hair and do something with that. I think that might lend itself to it.
Wow,
That could be a
that's
very
pretty
fun
cool.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, sounds
Okay.
like a great idea. I'm always
Now
open to
this-
ideas.
Yeah, of course. This next one's called Mountain Cha-Cha. And
Mountain King Cha-Cha. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mountain
that's the Mountain King. Yeah, yeah. So tell us about that.
So this one is based off Peter Gynt from Grieg's In the Hall of the Mountain King. Every child, I think, knows this, maybe from cartoons. It's just a really popular theme. So it seemed that it was an appropriate chapter for our project. And the main thing I was going for here is I was really into this Cuban timba band called Bambaleo. And they were really big in the 90s. Lazarito Valdez is the piano player from that group. He's probably my favorite Cuban piano player. And so I'm sort of thinking like that guy when I'm playing this piece. And it's cha-cha-cha, which is a Cuban rhythm that comes that was really one of the rhythms that was brought in through the salsa phenomenon that happened in the 60s, and we can talk about the history of that a little bit. But cha-cha-cha is one of those things where I think everybody can get it, no matter what. There are some rhythms that are more complicated than others, but this one, every little kid, I mean, to this day, my kids, when, here in Los Angeles, when they sing Happy Birthday in song, they still, in classes, they still say, Happy birthday to you, cha-cha-cha, happy birthday to you, cha-cha-cha.
I had not heard that.
Yeah, I don't know. Kids just started doing that, and it just kind of tells you that, like, everybody knows cha-cha-cha. Everybody knows. And it comes from, which is a crazy story, it comes from the way people dance to it. They would shuffle their feet, go cha-cha-cha on the dance floor at the end of the bar. So it was like da-da, da-da, cha-cha-cha, da-da, cha-cha-cha. And sometimes it's called cha-cha, and sometimes it's called cha-cha-cha. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But anyway, this is so we took Mountain King and we made it a cha-cha-cha, and then at the end we play a little timba, and I'll talk more about how the ending works after we listen.
Do you want me to play a little of the ending too then?
Sure. Why don't maybe play a little bit of the beginning and then skip to about 2.5 minutes.
Okay. I'm getting goosebumps just listening to this. It's great.
Thank you.
What a lot of
Um,
fun. Oh my God.
so at the end, we go into timba, and I've mentioned that a few times. I probably should talk about what timba is for
Yeah.
people who don't know it. People who aren't Cuban or don't know Cuban music don't generally know what timba is, but I think timba is the most exciting thing that's come out of the Caribbean. To me, it's right up there with the phenomenon of reggaeton. It's such an important music. It's really kind of like a fusion of funk and salsa and rumba and son montuno, and it is truly a modern Cuban style. And artists like Pedrito Martinez and Havana de Primera are sort of, and of course Alain Perez. These guys are the modern champions of timba music. And between Havana and Miami, and of course all over the world, this is really, the most challenging and frontier Cuban music there is. And when I really hadn't heard it at all until I went to Cuba in 2015, and it was a little like it just blew me away because the energy and technical expertise that I was witnessing in Cuba was so unique. So I came from New England, and in New England, where I was growing up, lots of jam bands, lots of Grateful Dead / Fish culture. And I love jam bands, no disrespect to them. But the reality is those bands, it's not a priority for those bands to be particularly tight in terms of like being really like locked in. Now, when you hear Latin music, you hear a good Latin band, they are absolutely locked in.
Yeah.
So and one of the reasons for that is when you talk to salsa musicians, the reason they're so locked in is because it's a dance culture. You guys playing Guido for 3 hours, like you cannot deviate. For that particular role, there's no improvisation allowed. You get fired if you do that. So there's a real strict discipline to making it really dance. And the reason you get fired is not because it's some authoritarian regime in a salsa band. It's because people will stop dancing, and then you lose your job. So the priority is you got to keep the people dancing. And so what happens is the guys who really play that music, they get really good and they get technically great. So take all that training and put it into timba music, where you're combining with the freshness and vibe of American funk, American pop, even a little rock and roll, combined with all these incredible technique that these guys have. You're dealing with a really, really high level of musicianship in what is essentially this modern music that it's kind of open season. Salsa music, the one way to think about it, and this is a little bit of a dirty thing to say, but it'll stick with you, is that salsa music is the really, really good date, and timba music is the great sex after the date.
I love it.
So to me, that kind of sums up the energy of timba music.
Wow. And by the way, you're working with some exotic instruments. I have to ask you, there's a guitar behind you that looks like it was designed by Salvador Dali. What is that? What is that?
So I think you might be looking at this crazy giraffe-looking bass over here.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if my camera follows me. I can maybe give you a little bit of a tour.
Yeah.
Actually, this bass was created by a guy in Nebraska who basically it's a fretless upright bass. It's a little bit like a baby bass in salsa bands, and it just ended up having such a cool body and a great sound, and it's just fun to play. And a huge part of instruments is that they have to be attractive to the player, or else it's not inspiring to play. And so this one's just so fun to play. And I play bass a lot in high school. It's kind of my second instrument, so I do a lot of recording on film scores and some other things with the bass.
You play guitar too, which we'll feature a little later as well.
I do, yes.
Yeah, very impressive. Okay, let's talk about this next one, which is Scheherazade. Tell us a little bit about that.
Great. So after I started the Beethoven Havana thing, a really nice guy who's a British guy named Charlie Seam reached out to me, and he was in Europe doing concertos as a soloist. He's a phenomenal violinist, and he said, I really want to do something different, and you seem to have a really different approach with classical music. Could we do something together? And I said, well, it happens that I'm working on an arrangement of Scheherazade, and so I called up my friends at Steinway and I said, hey, listen, would you be willing to do a music video if we could get a day at the factory to record a music video. And they said, well, it turns out we got a work holiday coming up. If you can shoot the video in about 5 hours, you're welcome to use the floor. And I said, that's amazing. So Steinway was really cool, and they let us shoot a beautiful music video and featuring Charlie Siem playing Scheherazade, which is Rimsky-Korsakov's, of course, great tone poem about Scheherazade and the the story of how Scheherazade saved her life by telling stories over and over again.
Yeah.
The Sultan would keep her alive just to hear her great stories. And this is based off the second movement of the Scheherazade suite that Rimsky-Korsakov created.
Beautiful. Unbelievable. Just really nice. Wow. You know, Chris Payne is a guy that does some amazing images of things that are recursive or replicating. And he has a picture of Steinway piano shells all lined up in a tunnel. And I use that on my album called Classical Sojourn. Just beautiful. But this piece
So
is,
good.
by the way, not only do I love with this piece, but we're also starting to get a hint for all your other percussive stuff that you do with the piano. There's
Yeah.
another video in here that shows you all the things you compile, and then you have something under your seat with little bongos and
Uh-huh.
rattles and things like that. That you do you operate those with your feet in real time while you're playing? Is that what you're doing, or how's that work?
So it's a modified talking drum. So what
Uh-huh.
happens, I have a pressure pedal with my right foot that I can play, or actually sometimes with my left foot, depending on needing my right foot for the sustain pedal.
Yeah.
But basically, a talking drum works that when you squeeze it, the ropes of the drum make the head tighter, so it goes up in pitch. So it has this talking effect, like do 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 do.
Ah, yeah.
And so it's essentially the same phenomenon, but I've got a wire instead of hands running it, and then I play it on either side, so it can go. And I was using that for a period of time. Yeah, exactly.
That was wonderful. That's great. Anything else you want to say before we move on to Mahler's Resurrection?
Yeah. So I will just say that Steinway's been amazing. They've been. I'm a Steinway artist, and so it's really wonderful to have had that opportunity to play there. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And
Yeah.
Charlie and I are still good friends, and hopefully we'll work together on lots of things. But
Yeah, very talented.
phenomenal violinist and a terrific guy.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now for something completely different, Mahler, whole different kind of genre of classical. So tell us about that.
Mahler. Okay, so yeah, I mean, part of this project is there have been a lot of versions of Beethoven's Fifth as a salsa, and I got to be mindful of the fact that there's no point in trying to do something that's already been done. And so sometimes when it comes to something like Mahler, which is like the opposite of Caribbean music, I think in some ways,
Yeah.
I think about that a lot. But my idea for this actually came from something that I learned by listening to musicologists who talk about the origin of music in Cuba versus the origin of music in Europe. And I think a really interesting thing to think about is European classical music, generally speaking, is based off the Christian church. So the principles are harmony and melody, as if you're reaching up to a god in the sky, right? So if you think about, again, we go back to Mozart's Lacrimosa, right? The melody keeps going up and up and up. We're trying to get closer to God in those religious classical pieces. But
Mm.
that principle of how music is written, prioritizing harmony and high melody, that's all over classical music. And that you could really argue that that comes from a Christian sort of value
Yeah,
system, right?
fascinating.
On
Yeah.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And on the other hand, let's say again, I'm speaking really broadly because this is not always the case, but in Cuba, Yoruba traditions that came from slaves in Cuba, masking their religion with Christian gods, became something called Santeria. So
Mm.
Santeria is basically a combination of Catholicism and Yoruba polytheistic religion.
Mm.
So their gods are in the earth and the ground and the ocean. And so priorities in that music that comes from that religion is on the low things like dance, improv on a low drum, or dancing. So really, when you combine music from the Caribbean with music from Europe, you could see that you're actually combining roots that represent an entirely different existential point of view, right? You
Yeah.
could kind
Mm.
of see how it's really, think how different it must be if you come, I came from North America. I grew up kind of agnostic, but most people around me were Christian religion,
Yeah.
and God is always up in the sky. But if God is the earth, you might live differently on the earth thinking this way.
Mm.
I find this really, really interesting because, again, when you're going back looking for contrast as an arranger, it's fun to think that you're mixing the music that has the roots in heaven and the other one that has the roots in the earth,
Right.
and you're bringing it together. And
Mm.
so with Mahler's Resurrection, this is an example of another, it's not exactly a religious piece, but obviously he's making references to biblical themes and the
Right.
resurrection. And at the
Right.
same time, we're using rumba, this Afro-Cuban rhythm that really also connects to the Yoruba roots. So I find it interesting to try to tie those two together in the
Mm.
arrangement. Obviously, this is kind of like the inside baseball of the arrangement. I don't need everybody to understand all this heady stuff. But
Right.
when I'm thinking about how to create the music, this is the framework and general theme that I'm trying to explore.
Excellent. Well, let's listen to some of this. This is wonderful. I love about this whole thing that you're doing, it really does bring together, I think it'll bring together potentially people too, as they perceive, there are people out there that probably never listen to Latin music and probably the people that never listen to classical. And I would
Yeah.
think the idea of being able to do both of those and bring people together, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Well,
So
I'm really glad you said that because, of course, that's what I want. There's this feeling when you listen to certain syncopated music, and I think rumba is a kind of music that I had this experience. When you don't have any background, the first time you hear it, you have no idea where the downbeat is, and it's very confusing. And the music's like spinning around you, and musicians either out loud or internally are screaming, "Where's the one? Where's the downbeat?" And the reality is, the moment you find it is this euphoric feeling of understanding that a lot of musicians have, and that's really when you fall in love, when you start to understand the music and you
mm,
understand that it's created by people who are thinking totally differently than I was. And one of the challenges with something, let's say rumba music, to stay with the example that's like that, is if you don't have a context for it, it's very hard to enjoy it. And
mm,
I kind of hope that I can be a little bit make it a little easier for people to dive into the water on this, because
yeah,
you're dealing with, I mean, honestly, the 500 years of Havana history is the 500 years of a phenomenon of musical and artistic creation that will never quite happen the same. We wouldn't want it to happen the same because, of course, the history is based on the brutal history of slavery. But all the horrible of that left a massive treasure that evolved in modern day Cuba, and we have
right.
to really appreciate the human experience that comes from that. So I feel that you know learning about it is a never-ending joyous experience for me. I mean,
Mm,
that's really what it comes down to. I love learning more, and I love understanding. I love getting together with my Latin musician friends who show me little secrets here and there.
yeah,
That's what I live for. So, but I hope that people listen to this. If they come from a world like I did, they see, you know, the water's fine. Dive in, go
yeah.
enjoy it. And to their credit, I think it's they don't. Some people just don't even know where to start. So it's a nice thing to hear a familiar melody and say, "Oh, okay, this is like this version." And
Yeah.
frankly, that's how I got into African music. And my dad liked the Paul Simon album Graceland. Now, Graceland had a ton of African musicians on there, and when I first heard that record, it was crazy for me. I was 10 years old, and my dad's name was Alan, and he wanted to buy the song "You Can Call Me Al." So he was a Paul Simon fan. He bought it at a gas station driving home, and we listened to the whole album driving home from my cousin's house in Connecticut to Boston. And I was never the same. And he,
Wow.
I would sneak into his car for like the next 2 weeks and just listen to that cassette over and over again because I'd never heard anything like African singing, the rhythms
Yeah.
from the Congo, all the percussion, all the instruments, not to mention the artistry of Paul Simon himself. So that's really the first thing that made me go, there's a whole world of music out there that I'm not
Wow.
exposed to.
Oh,
And I just got really excited and just kept going further and further down the Afro-Caribbean rabbit hole.
love it.
And so, yeah, so I guess my point in mentioning that is that these fusion projects that artists take on, they do open the world for people. And
Yeah.
I hope that as the world was open for me, that my project can do that for others.
Well, what I love about what you're doing too is you take a musical piece and then branch off into something completely different. I do a little bit of that a different way. I'll take like two measures of a piece, a famous piece, and then write a whole other thing around that little
Great.
motif. And it's unrecognizable, but it was inspired by that, and it's completely different. Probably the original composer might not even recognize it. But I love what you're doing at a whole other level where you take a piece and then reimagine it in a different world with a different genre, and it works. And I'm sure of course, we'll never be totally sure, but I would think the Beethovens and Bachs and Mozarts and Mahlers of the world would go, "Wow, that's really kind of interesting." So now this next one's dear to me because some of my senior students that are just starting to learn piano, I start them with the Bach Prelude in C because it's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward to play, and you take that and do some wonderful rumba things with it. So, do you want to give us a little background before I play it?
Sure. This is an arrangement of the first movement of the Well-Tempered Clavier, which is Bach's Prelude in C. Yes, as you said, every young piano student plays it, and we've changed the rhythm a little bit to match a rumba style, and then we've used the percussion from the piano to execute the rumba percussion. As a film composer, and I would often modify my piano, like putting mutes and hammers inside the piano just to make special effects. For horror films, this is something that actually works really, really well because you can make lots of scary sounds.
Oh my God.
But With close miking technique, what I did is I took the same approach and made all the sounds of a Cuban percussion ensemble with the piano. So, for example,
Nice. That was amazing. Yeah.
the melody you hear in the bridges of the piano, that's the melody of the conga drums, dung, 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 which is what you hear in the rhythm called Wawanko, which is one of the rumba rhythms.
I really love the beginning of this too. It's a lot of fun. By the way, have you thought about putting sheet music together for this?
Yes, I have sheet music for this and many of my arrangements on
Oh,
my
you
website.
do? Oh, that's
Yeah,
wonderful. Oh, I didn't
yeah,
check that yet. That's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's available. I think everything we'll listen today is actually available on sheet music.
I
So
love it. I love it. That's wonderful.
yeah.
Now, these next few are a little different. These are your earlier times, and here you are singing. So you are very well rounded. You play guitar, you sing. So the first one here is called "The Missing." Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, this is from an album I created called Combinations. After I finished playing with my band with my brother, and I was in LA, I did an album of songs in about 2013, and this is from that album. And this was an interesting time in my life because I was definitely struggling to kind of make a life as a musician and as a young father, and I needed to sort of I guess get some of that out in my songwriting. But I write songs all the time, including for Big City Greens, the animated show I work
Yeah.
on. And it's a huge part of what I do. And before I started the whole project, this was an album of songs that I put together called Combinations. And The Missing is the last song on that record.
There's no skin that's made of steel. There's no weight that can't be carried. There's no bruise that doesn't heal. There's no past that can't be buried. Since the legend's what they sell, that's the story we all tell. So don't break yourself in two just to find the missing truth. There's no science to a soul, but we all know when it's restless. We may find we've lost control, but we'll live not to regret it. We are wise and we're a fool, but we're not what others do. Yet we all somehow believe we must find the missing piece.
I love this. And is this something did you write all these lyrics yourself?
I did, yeah.
These are great lyrics.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Really
Uh,
nice. Wow.
yeah. That was a time when we were my wife and I had young kids, and I remember the feeling of thinking about how we were raised and how we wanted to do it differently. And the whole thing is kind of a meditation on, you know, maybe we have families because we feel like something is missing, and maybe we feel like, we're trying to correct some childhood wrong, or something like that. And we were kind of in this contemplative mood, and I realized we were just kind of overthinking everything, and it was just really about making sure that I think, I guess that's really where I was coming to, is like, we're putting too much time thinking about how to do things. Let's just try it and
Yeah.
lead with goodwill.
I literally had goosebumps on that. Is the whole album like this, of lyrics and stuff like that? Is it?
It's pretty moody, man. It's pretty
Wow.
moody.
I'm loving
But
it. It's very, very, very emotional. And
yeah,
what album is that again?
it's called Combinations, and it's from
Okay.
2016.
Yeah, very nice.
And yeah, there was a lot of different songs. Yeah, that's just a real songwriting album. And obviously that's not a big part of putting out the fusion. The fusion stuff is a little different,
Right.
though we do some
Yeah,
original music in it. But yes, that was more my songwriting chapter, I could say.
I love it. When did you find out that you could sing well?
Ha! Well, I don't know about singing well, but
No, it's good.
I live in a world where Paul Simon and Randy Newman can have a career, so I might as well give it a shot. I started singing. I've always sung. I enjoy singing. I sang a cappella in college, and
Wow,
I
wow.
did. I sing whenever I can. A lot of the demos I write, I still sing on. I don't sing as a performer very often, though it's been known to happen.
Yeah. Now this next one is with you with a guitar each
Yeah.
time around. Tell me a little bit of something about that.
Um, This is a straight ahead love song, and I wrote it on the 10th anniversary of
Oh,
my when I was married with Lisa,
yeah,
our 10th wedding anniversary. And
yeah.
I remember I wrote her a song, and I brought her to the backyard, and I started playing it, and the people next door started doing repairs on their pool, and they started making all this noise. And halfway through this song, where I'm like pouring my heart out about how I'm going to love her for all eternity, all this noise kept coming out, and I think she was trying so hard to listen to me like struggle through this love song while it was absolutely cacophonous, which was this highly comedic moment. It was kind of a metaphor for everything in our life at the time. We were
Oh my God. Oh
trying
my
so hard
God.
to keep the love alive, and our life was so chaotic. We had two crazy kids, and I
Wow.
was I had a career there where I was working day and night, and but it was a success because we've just celebrated our 20th anniversary.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful. Yeah, because when you said I was married to her, I was thinking, oh no, don't tell me it ended. So, oh,
it didn't, it didn't, it didn't.
that's wonderful.
We found a way to stay together.
I love it. I love it.
There's a familiar feeling, somehow I've always known. In all the joy you bring me, these things have always shown. Throughout the world around us, the air and the sound, that's how I'll find you each time around. Maybe we're old souls circling, following our own clues. Maybe I've learned to love you by walking in many men's shoes. Maybe each time we're testing how we'll be found, I'm searching for you each time around. Though there
Very nice. Sweet words. Oh my
Thanks,
God.
man.
That's
Thanks.
great. That's great. She's a lucky lady.
Oh, you're so kind. You're so
Yeah.
kind.
Wow, that's really sweet.
I'm a lucky guy.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Now, this next one's called Trains Passing.
Yeah.
Uh, and this one, you also have singing going on and percussion, so it's quite fun. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Um, Everyone has that experience if they live in New York City where they flash across a train window and they see people with entirely different lives, and if we don't have our face buried in a newspaper or a cell phone, we're looking out and sometimes wonder, what is this person experiencing? Do they have a complicated inner world like I do? And you have a flash of them and then you never see them again. And I find this to be this fascinating thing. It's like this really most crowded city in the world puts people together in this moment where you stare at each other and sometimes you make eye contact. And it's an interesting phenomenon, I think, of it's like a accidental effect of public transport. So the most pedestrian thing we do all day has these moments where you could have this absolutely soul diving experience with a stranger for 3 seconds. Yeah, and that's kind of what inspired the song.
Very interesting. Sometimes when I'm driving and it's a busy highway, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to have an app that would tell you who everyone else is in their car and what they do? Of course, they'd have to let you do that, but it'd have these apps that would tell you who's around you. I know there are apps out there that tell you if a friend of yours is in town or someone that you know is anywhere near you. But it's a fascinating world. We're souls in the universe, and how do we communicate, and how much do we really know about what each other is going through? It's really quite fascinating. So you wrote a song about this. This is wonderful.
And also, this is the first time I really experimented with percussive counterpoint. This is actually before I went to Cuba in 2013, I think. So I just wanted to say also this song has a lot of percussion that starts it. So doing kind of percussion counterpoint and percussion multi-tracking. This is the first time I really experimented with that before Beethoven and Havana.
Yeah. So this is a case where if I'm correct about it, you play a percussive element and then you have it repeat. You set it into a cycle, it repeats, and you overlay other ones on top of it, right?
Exactly. It's kind of like a layering effect. Exactly.
Yeah. Very nice. Okay. So this is Trains Passing.
At last it's come to this, a train ticket in your fingertips. 2 words escape your lips, so long, so long. Like a flash before my eyes, not a shadow left behind. Just me left wondering why 2 rights became 2 wrong. No talk of how to change, one day you turn the page. No verbal war to wage, so calm, so calm. I'm left with space and sound, an old photo that I found. Now I see the hidden frown, 2 rights were always wrong. What kind of man lets a woman like you just walk away from him? What kind of fool?
Absolutely love your lyrics. This is great. This is a whole other inside view of you. Which is just wonderful. This is just wonderful. We're going to go back now to the whole Latin feel with Bach's Cuban Concerto. And it starts out with this wonderful clapping rhythm and then gets into a whole solo guitar and orchestra. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this was a really fun collaboration with my good friend, Olivia Soler. And she was a trace player in Cuba, and I saw something she was doing on Instagram, and I reached out. She was basically playing classical music on the Cuban trace. Now, the Cuban trace is a Cuban guitar where instead of 6 differently tuned strings, they've basically put it in 3 pairs of 2. And, in Cuban music, the montuno that you hear in pianos, like donkey, 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 da donkey, that comes from Cuban trace playing. Trace playing it's a very important folkloric instrument for all sorts of Cuban styles. And she was playing classical music with this. So I felt like this is a perfect person to reach out to. Mm-hmm. And so we connected, and she said, "Oh, yeah, you're the Beethoven and Havana guy." And I said, "That's me." And I was like, "Look, this is crazy, but I really want to do this big Bach project, and I need someone who can really play and understands Cuban music." Yeah. And so we collaborated on this. We took a Bach keyboard concerto, the D minor keyboard concerto by Bach, and we converted it to an arrangement for piano and trace as like a double concerto. And we recorded it in Boston because when we started talking while she was still in Havana, and I remember thinking, how are we going to get together? Because it's so hard to go to Havana and record. There's legal problems with being in Cuba and all that stuff. It's a
really,
headache. Yeah. So But then she wrote me one day and said, "Hey, I got a scholarship from the Latin Grammy Foundation, and I'm going to go to Berklee College of Music." And I said, "Great, I'm going to organize something in my hometown of Boston with you." And we basically, with the Boston Public Quartet, who expanded their string section to be our orchestra, we had a really amazing opportunity to do this arrangement. And I'm so proud of this piece. And it was actually nominated for a Latin Grammy last year. So
Nice.
I was very proud that happened. And I'm so proud of Olivia.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Olivia, it couldn't have happened without her. She's a phenomenal musician and an amazingly good sport. And she just played her ass off on this. There's no other.
And this is a wonderful piece. It goes on for 9 minutes. We can't do justice to it, but I encourage people to spend some time on the website and go through these. So just a lot of fun. So here we go. This is Bach's Cuban Concerto. Videography on this is great too. It's just all this action, all this editing going on. It's really a lot of production work that really went into this. Really phenomenal stuff. So thank you for all that work that you do.
Yeah.
This last piece is the first piece I heard, the Rachmaninoff Prelude in G minor, which I also have played and absolutely love this piece. And what you've done with it is just so amazing. And how did you even come about thinking about what to do with this piece? It's just amazing what you did.
Oh, thanks. Well, this is from the new album that's going to be coming out later this year called Super Fusion. And basically, it's going to be a collection of Rachmaninoff, Chopin, maybe some Liszt, and maybe some other composers. Oh. But it's really this is one of those staple Rachmaninoff pieces that if you play Rachmaninoff as a solo classical pianist, you definitely play this piece. It's one of his most famous preludes. It's a great march with a great melody. It's really a hit that he wrote, and I've always loved playing it. This is one of those really challenging pieces, I think, as you know, because it requires a lot of these big octave jumps very quickly. Yeah. And, there's a rhythm in timba music that we call champola, which is where the right hand is perpetually on the offbeats and the bass plays on 3 and 4. So it's like 3 or 4, 3 or 4. And it's kind of based on that groove that you see. Sometimes that rhythm's called a caballo, like a horse, because it's kind of galloping, but it's very similar kind of styles. But anyway, that's kind of the fundamental in here, and I basically did a rhythm shift on the original, and you can see how that carries us through putting Rachmaninoff on vacation in Havana.
I love it. All right, enjoy this, folks. This is a lot of fun. Really great. You know, I have to go back now and listen to it now that I've got this new lens to listen to it through. It's going to be a whole different experience. What a trip. What a great trip.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you can have that experience and enjoy the
Yeah.
music that way. Thank you.
Yeah. I can't
Incredible.
thank you enough, Joachim. This has been so much fun.
Thank
Uh,
you.
you know, there's got to be some DNA in you that's Latin because you own it. You really do own it. It's amazing.
Well,
And I'm sure there's going to be
I
a lot of wonderful, yeah, yeah.
thank you so much. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is that, thing about this music is it takes a lot of dedication, and every time I think I know what I'm doing, I realize I'm just getting started. So
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
highly humbled by how deep the rabbit hole is, and it's a really fun rabbit hole. So I hope everyone out there who loves this music, if it's foreign to you or new to you, I hope you also dive in because it's a blast.
Yeah, so please go to his website, go to the YouTube channel, all the videos there. And then when does your next album come out? When do you think it's going to be out there?
So we're aiming for fall of 2026, and
Okay,
I'll be on tour more in 2027, hopefully promoting
excellent.
the album. But yeah, Superfusion will be the title, and I'm finishing it this summer.
What a trip. I can't get over how much fun I had listening to this. And will continue to listen to it because I want to listen to more, especially of that Combinations album. That's just so, that's not the current thing, but it's just so evocative and emotional. And I was so moved by it, but I just love all the music you're doing. So this is great. What a great trip this has been for me. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. We look forward to
Thank you.
seeing you again soon. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks so much.